This is the DRF Players Podcast.
What's up? It's Tuesday, May 19th. It's the DRF Players Podcast. Here with Peter Thomas Fornatale, Mike Hogan. I'm Matt Bernier. It's a couple days past the 140th running of the Preakness. The rain came and went in about 25 minutes. It was enough to make it an absolute slop fest. American Pharoah wins. First two legs of the Triple Crown. We go on to Belmont in 3 weeks with a chance at immortality. What do you guys think?
Oh, man.
You were out in California.
I was out in California. I was watching with great interest. I really thought I had the wrong channel for a second when I saw where is this? Which track is pouring? Where is it pouring? What's going on? Is that what's happening? Is this TV messed up? What? Nope. What bad luck in a way. And people have said, well, why? It was very clear on the radar all day that it was coming. Why didn't they just move it up? And you see, that's where you get into trouble when you have broadcast partners.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You need to honor your broadcast partner. You can't say the Preakness is 6:12 and then run it at 5:48 without upsetting a whole lot of people, fans and broadcast partners. So it kind of was what it was. Now, where were you vis-a-vis the deluge?
We were, if you've ever been into Pimlico, into the main area of the grandstand. There's a couple different spots, but we were kind of set up right by the main turnstiles, so we were inside. We didn't get hit with any rain or anything, but
good production call.
Yeah, honestly, because it was. I mean, yes and no, because we had to deal with all the drunks coming through after the race was over, trying to get on camera with us.
Oh, fun!
Yeah. So that was good.
Do we have a tape of this? Can I go back and watch it?
No tape. But you may be able to see smoke coming out of our ears at that point because we were just on absolute fumes.
Must
then.
Have been horrible.
No, but I mean it was all in good fun. But yeah, we watched it from one of the monitors inside. There was a minute that I thought they were going to try and push it back because I had a buddy of mine who's a camera guy. He came by after the race, and he was up on the roof doing photography for the race. And this is the one where Larry doesn't have a booth. He's calling it from the roof.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
And he even said it for a minute that you couldn't see the track, so he was going to have to call the race from the monitor. And luckily, just as they were essentially loading into the gate, it let up. It still rained during the race, but it wasn't like it was for those.
Larry could see the backstretch.
Yeah, for about the 15 minutes leading up to it, though, it was whatever you saw on the monitor. It was like that and then some. It was raining sideways. You couldn't see outside. It was crazy.
Yeah, prior to the race, they have how they do the Maryland, My Maryland, and they have the choral group. The NBC broadcast did not show the chorus singing because they were all wearing white pants and were completely drenched. And I'm sure you could see
everything,
all kinds of underwear and everything.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, and the amount of rain.
Trouble with the FCC.
The amount of rain that came down in that short amount of time was crazy.
Yeah.
Was crazy.
No, it was absolutely surreal. And NBC was willing to stick with it. They gave them the option to do the pushback, but I guess they either anticipating that break was coming or just decided to roll the dice and keep what they missed post by 4 minutes? It was pretty spot on.
Yeah, well, it wasn't far off. And then really, because after that, it really more or less stopped. It was spitting a little bit, but it wasn't, compared to that 20-minute stretch. It was everything that you thought it was, and then some. It came down in a major way. The thing was, for about 2 hours leading up to it, and really even at the beginning of the day, it had that sort of, I'm not going to say quite as muggy and gross as a Saratoga afternoon when you know that the thunder's coming through.
Oh, yeah.
But we were talking to a bunch of locals throughout the week, at different events and whatnot, and they were saying, it's been so dry for such a long time. And then Friday's weather, where it was kind of that nice, cool 75, but it's one of those tomorrow when the heat does show up, it's only a matter of time. It's not if, it's when. Mm-hmm. And as the day continued to progress, it got hotter and muggier and nastier, and it was just it's coming.
I haven't seen any of the images, but I'm guessing the infield after the day resembled sort of a degenerate Woodstock.
I mentioned it to Illman when we popped our head out just for some fresh air for a minute. I said, it's going to look like Woodstock. It's going to be a disaster.
Just so happy you know the reference.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm going back. I'm 94, not way back. Not the real one.
Still, but you've seen but even just to have a cultural touch point of knowing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, obviously the weather played a big factor in the race, but let's start off with a few days before. Let's start off with the post position draw.
Yes.
Now, I didn't get a chance in the midst of the chaos to discuss or to go back and listen to you guys on Tuesday. Had you known about Mr. Z at that point?
No,
Mr. Z came Wednesday.
Our
Came
podcast
Wednesday
was
morning.
horribly dated because of immediately
Prior
because of
to
the Mr. Z news.
Right,
Yes,
Mr. Z
although-
came the morning of the draw.
Right.
Correct.
Although on Thursday when we did the webinar, we knew about Mr. Z, of course, because we already had the draw and
Right.
post positions and everything.
So the news about Mr. Z and the sale of Calumet and the whole nine, I thought he was going to be quarter-horsed out of there to get to the lead, and he was all but quarter-horsed. I mean,
He was. more or
Nakatani
less.
moved him.
Yeah, I mean the plan was clearly a dead send, and I thought it was interesting. I mean, and Victor, very conscious of that. I mean, more or less did the super classy horse version of the same thing. He was not interested in letting that horse go to the lead and letting Mr. Z get the lead unless Mr. Z did something like showed a burst of speed that he wasn't anticipating. He was 100% certain. I think the rain sealed the deal that he did not want to mess around at all. He was going to use American Pharoah hard from the bell, and to me, that is the most impressive thing about American Pharoah's performance in that race. I've heard some people question how good of an effort it was. This or that. I thought it was pretty awesome because he was running the entire time. There were no breathers for American Pharoah. What do you guys think? I'm correct about that, or where do you stand on sort of the lead question of the day? Like how good was that race?
Well, I agree. I mean, he was used a lot more early than I thought he would be because I figured in my thought coming into the race, rain aside, maybe rain changed tactics perhaps, but rain aside, my thought was if you think you're on the best horse and you draw the rail, you just let the race break out the way it does. If you break well and you get to the lead, then you take it. If others are intent on going to lead, you take back and you stalk, and you just kind of, if you have a horse with the speed to make your own trip, you let him make your own trip. And as soon as the rain started and then the gates opened and I saw Victor quarter horsing him out of the gate, I said, wow, he's either going to be a fantastic horse to be able to wire this field, or he's going to be used way too much early, and who knows what's going to happen late. And on the turn, I thought maybe Divining Rod might be able to get to him. But then he opened up in the lane and pulled away. So I was impressed. I mean, I don't know if we're going to have another Triple Crown winner. It's possible. But I was impressed.
In the week leading up to it, I was doing some stuff with some other people while we were down there too. And one of the other people came to me on Thursday and said Baffert has made it clear. And I didn't want to come out and say it when we were on live or anything because you never know. I mean, this is hearsay. I didn't hear it from the horse's mouth. They had said Baffert had made it clear. There's no way Mr. Z is ahead of American Pharoah going into the first turn. And I looked at him. I said, what do you mean no way? They said, it is clear. If it's 22 to the opening quarter, he is going to be on the lead. And there's a part of me that looks at it and says, you know what? You think you're on the best horse? Forget about it. Who cares?
I also think there might be a little bit of lesson learned.
100%. I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, based on Victor and the Belmont last
100%.
year, and what me and a lot of people thought was kind of a tentative ride when on the best horse. When you're on the best horse, you want to be aggressive. Now, I still thought that, Mr. Z, maybe you just let him go and sit off him. But I think what this tells us is how much faith that Baffert and Espinoza had in the horse's ability to run, just to outrun him, just like pretend like he's basically not in the race. Just get the lead, don't let anybody in front of you, and go on. You're probably right. I was thinking like what Mike said, that maybe the weather had to do with the tactics, but I totally buy that was the plan.
And this was Thursday. I mean, at this point we knew what the post positions were. We knew the whole nine. They said there is under no circumstances he not on the lead.
And that also might have played into it, actually. When you're on the rail, that plan makes a lot more sense.
Right.
You know what I mean? If you're
True.
outside, maybe you can just get a beautiful position taking no kickback off a cheap speed. But from the rail, things can go wrong if you don't sand.
I also think we have to acknowledge the fact, now again, I don't think the track changed just because of the rain and the sealing process. It was inside speed all day at Pimlico.
Yeah, the track, and it was kind of all weekend, wasn't it?
It was Friday as well.
Yeah, there was a funny snarky tweet from my buddy Nick Tamaro, who said after one of the early races on Friday, the track is fast and farrowed.
Yeah. I mean,
Which made me laugh.
But that's also one of those things where, I mean, look, we have to acknowledge that too, that they understood what was going on with the track as well. Why not just ride it along? But you brought it up. I thought that was the most impressive thing, and I said it. I go, the fact that he went fast. The final time, a lot of people have complained about, saying it was slow, and I mean it was slowish, 58 and 2. But the fact that he went so fast early on, that was the biggest part to me. That he went 22 and 4, 46 and 2, I think, for the half.
Yeah,
and
it was 46 and 2.
3/4 was 11 and change. But and then. Something I hadn't thought about, but then Sunday morning when I had to go back to the track early on, when he was walking the shed row and then came out and they washed his legs down, Gary Stevens came back after the race and weighed in at 135. All the jocks essentially gained 9 to 10 pounds worth of rain. So he did that pretty much carrying a $135.
Right, and mud.
Right, yeah, exactly. So, take that into consideration too. And that's why I'm even more impressed with it, because I'm not a big weight guy, but 10 pounds is a lot.
Absolutely.
Especially and it's not even so much, I don't care about it reflected in the final raw time. I care about it in the opening quarter and the opening half. He had to run every step.
Yeah, and this race, unfortunately, the Derby every year, people come out of the woodwork and they, what was the final time of the Derby? 2:03 or something.
3 flat, yeah.
And they complain, well, how is he so great doing this? And to me, that's people who don't understand speed figures and how they work and how they account for why 2:03 actually represented a legitimate 1:05 buyer figure with a wide trip. Here's the bad news. There is no figure maker in the world, no figure making methodology in the world that I believe can accurately come up with a number for the Preakness. This is pure guesswork. Now, I haven't seen. Have you guys checked to see what the buyer team has assigned? 102. Okay.
Yeah, I tweeted it out the next day.
Yeah.
Tale of Verve was the only one to improve off of his previous race.
Now, that was my other thing too, though. When I first looked at it, I mean, there's no question who the best horse was. And then I said, boy, and I know it was a wet track, but Tale of Verve, literally on paper, needed to improve something stupid like 60 lengths to be competitive. It's not an exaggeration. He came in with a 72 buyer for a career best effort.
He paired him up, though.
He did, and look, I love the paired up. I cannot envision a scenario, or I couldn't, where he would jump up almost 20 points. So at first I was like, wow, a Tale of Verve. But then you think about it, the 2 California horses, we'll get to both of them more in depth, but the 2 California horses had probably never seen rain in their life, let alone gone over a deluge. Danzig Moon, he apparently, they scoped him after the race and the vet said he's fine, just he ended up eating half of the track. He was just full of mud in his lungs. And then Divining Rod ran a good race. I thought Javier may have moved a little bit early, but
he was trying to win the race.
He was trying to win the race. I can't fault him there.
He was trying to win the race. If he was running for second, he would have got second easy.
Right.
But he was trying to win the race. God bless him.
So the 102, and we had Dick Girardi on DRF Live on Saturday during the day. It was he and I. And before the week started, I had talked to JB before I left. And she goes, well, what do you think? And I said, there's a part of me that thinks this is where he freaks, where he ends up winning by 10 or 12 and everyone is just in a fevered pitch going into Belmont. And the number comes back, and of course she doesn't know what the hell I'm talking about with the number. And I go, and the number comes back like a 110 or a 112. And then when we had Dick on, Dick's logic, and he had written an article earlier in the week that was on DRF.com, basically saying that he thought that he was coming up on the peak effort in the Preakness, because that 105 in the Arkansas Derby, And then the 105 in the Kentucky Derby was the first real hard race he's had.
Absolutely.
And he needed it from a fitness standpoint. And now he was cranked really and ready to roll. So when that 102 comes back, me personally, the way that I'm looking at it is that it's much closer to like a 110.
I was going to say the same thing. And where this happens is, well, I was going to say it from a different perspective, I think. Like, I think the raw, I see where they're coming from in terms of a raw figure. But I think this is a case, and I haven't even looked at any pace figures on this yet, but where the early pace, I think the race was that good because when you run that fast early and bottom out the field, which is more or less what happened, you don't have the ability to necessarily finish in the most flashy final time in the world. But had he been able to distribute his energy a little more evenly, I think maybe that figure is a 110. But
or the final margin ends up being greater than the 6 or 7 that it was.
That's right, because all he's trying to do is win the race. He's not trying to win the race by 10.
Right.
You know?
100% agree with that.
And I think that the tale of Verve, we've talked about before on the podcast and the webinar as well. Dallas Stewart, his whole bag is getting horses to finish.
Literally the last time I ever question any horse he enters in any of these races.
And I didn't like Tale of Verve at all. I mean, on paper, the paper was just too bad.
I said he should have been 99-1 before when we did the post show.
And I agree. I would have had the same thing. Would have the same thing on the value line. But the way that field got bottomed out there is just nobody. There's just nobody left running.
Somebody had to pick up the pieces.
Right. Somebody has to pick up the pieces, and you're good. And the guy who can really train his horses to finish, a very admirable quality. We've seen him do it now three times in the last couple of years.
3 times in 3 years, really. Yeah. You go back to the other 2 derbies, and then this year in the Preakness.
And I think some folks that's interesting note you had about Danzig Moon just taking. I haven't watched the trip enough to really comment on it, but it sounds like that's the role that in my brain that would be the part of Danzig Moon would be to come late and pick up pieces.
And that's why I picked him 3rd in the paper. But then, they talked to Mark Cassidy the next morning, and he said they scoped him and he was fine, but he was full of mud. Like he had just taken in way too much, and he couldn't breathe.
Yeah. So he probably weren't. He probably, I don't know if I want to say ran better than it looks, but probably better than expected.
He's got an excuse.
That's the word.
And you know what? It's good that now they're going to put him away until the Queen's Plate because he's a Canadian bred.
Yeah, that was probably
the goal anyway.
The goal all along. Right.
I'm taking that number isn't going to change. I wouldn't imagine, but I'm taking the standpoint that 102 is probably a lot bigger. Now, going forward, I don't necessarily know that it's a good thing. I think that a lot of people are going to look at that and say he regressed, again, just at face value, from the 105s to the 102, and say, oh, well, maybe he's going to be able to either rebound or whatever it is. I think he ran the 110. Now the question is, again, we go the paired up thing, and I stand by that with a lot of things, that he paired up those 105s. If he did move up to that 110, now is the regression going to happen?
Well, I mean, when you look at recent history, what's the old definition of insanity? The same thing happening over and over again and expecting a different result? Well, I understand. It's not how I feel, but I can understand how objectively somebody looking at it would say all these horses who've won the first 2 and regressed. I can see where somebody would say that you certainly can't discount that as a possibility for American Pharoah.
Well, so I think he will regress only because I don't know if at 12 furlongs anyone that wins the Belmont is going to post a triple-digit buyer. Simple as that. I mean, maybe the winner will, whoever that is. Very possibly, and probably from a betting standpoint, very likely it's going to be American Pharoah. But 12 furlongs in this day and age is not really conducive to posting really high buyer figures.
To your point, what are the last few winning figures of the Belmont, if you have them? If not, I can look them up.
Offhand, Tonalist got 100. Palace Malice, I believe, is a 98.
Okay, so just like what Mike's saying.
That being said, though, I think a lot of those numbers, again, just because it's such an oddity, where we don't run mile-and-a-half races,
it's hard to make a figure.
I think those numbers come based on what the horse has done in the past. So I feel like they looked at Tonalist and said he could project out to 100. And then you look at, Chrome had run the high 90s, occasionally would run a low 100 away from California. I think if for some reason, let's say American Pharoah were to win, in just reasonable fashion by 2 lengths, I wouldn't be shocked if it came back. And let's just say the final time is 31. I mean, I would imagine it probably is a 102 or a 104.
Maybe.
Maybe. I don't think we're going to see something ridiculous like a 110. Unless something insane happens, unless we have a Fleet Alex.
Tremendous machine.
I'm not going to go that far. I can use it with 8 claimers that are just, look like, hanging on the left lead, but they're winning by 15. He's moving like a tremendous. I can't do it when I'm actually talking about a horse.
Right.
Not yet, anyway.
Right.
But now the big question is, he's through 2. I'm not ready to anoint him as a great horse. I've seen a lot of people, Mike Watchmaker has said it often, and I agree. The word great, like all these hyperbolic terms are thrown out way too loosely. He's not great yet. He's very good. He's trending great. I mean, he's got 5 grade 1s to his name and 7 career starts. I mean, obviously, if he wins the Belmont, if this field goes intact, and I know Jay Privman kind of poo-pooed the idea that any horse that wins the Triple Crown is obviously deserving. I don't necessarily believe that.
When you say he poo-pooed it.
Well, yesterday, because a lot of people, and I even tweeted about it, I said, if this field stays intact for the Belmont and this horse wins, he is very clearly a deserving champion. I would have made the argument last year if California Chrome had won. I don't know that I necessarily would have looked at him and said...
Well, California Chrome wasn't a 2-year-old champion.
And I don't even mean that, though.
Here's where I'll disagree.
Okay.
There have been 11 Triple Crown winners.
Right.
None of them have faced more than 7 horses in the Belmont.
Right.
Secretariat faced 4. Seattle Slew faced 7. Some of them faced even 3, I believe. It's hard to go back retroactively and say, well, was that deserving? This day and age, you get horses like California Chrome facing, 10? 9? How many
I think it was 9. We had a little hiccup here with the recording process.
Modern technology.
That's right, modern technology.
Full cards.
And
like
storage and data. And
back in the day, Pete and I, I'm sure, remember when the tape would run out.
The tape ended, you hear a pop, and everything's good.
Yeah, you'd hear the tape recorder click stop, and then you'd know you were done. Instead, we're just rambling on, not realizing the card is full.
The card's full. We go through all of Zenyatta's PPs, and nobody's ever going to get to hear it.
No one has any idea. We'll pick that conversation up. So, but basically, you were buttoning it up with...
I was going to ask Mike. Mike was making the point about the Triple Crown field sizes and how many fewer horses that Secretariat and the Triple Crown winners of the 70s faced relative to the larger field sizes of today. And I was just wanted to throw out there or just ask, what that has to do with the question at hand of the greatness of potential greatness of American Pharoah.
Or the worthiness.
Yeah, well, so, and I think Privman's point, and it's one I agree with, is any horse that's able to win all 3 races within a span of 5 weeks in 3 different states for total purses of $5 million is certainly worthy. Whether or not they're great, and we can debate the meaning of the word great. For me, it's top echelon, maybe handful to 15 horses in the history of the sport. So, you could even make a case that there are some non-great Triple Crown winners of the 11 horses that have done it before. That said, those, and I did the work last year. I need to do a little bit. I need to revisit it. But the 11 Triple Crown winners faced an average of, I think, about 5 horses in the Belmont. The ones that have failed have faced a lot more. And it's, I think, partly become a little bit harder to win even the Derby. When we've talked about horses like Point Given and a Fleet Alex who could very well have been Triple Crown winners had the Kentucky Derby gone a little bit differently. Well, these days you don't face fewer than 16, 17, 18 horses.
This was a short field this year because of the defections.
Right.
A short field of 18 or 17, whatever it was.
Whereas, before 1980, you had as often a field that had fewer than enough needed for the auxiliary gate as you did needing the auxiliary gate. We've used the auxiliary gate every year, I think since 2000, right?
Sounds right.
Yeah. So I think it's just it's harder to win the Kentucky Derby to put yourself in a position to even get to the Triple Crown, beyond the doorstep of the Triple Crown. It's harder to win the Derby, and then when you're in the Belmont, you're facing more horses than you ever have in previous history. So
I might have said this before on this podcast, but this is my one big point about this is, regardless of whether or not a horse who pulls off this feat of the 3 races in 5 weeks at 3 different distances, regardless of whether that makes one a great horse, that is a seriously great achievement and something to go pretty nuts over.
Yeah, no, I this is one of those few times where I'm already saying, like, if he somehow does this, I'm more than content to throw him up into that great category, And again, that was what we got cut off, and we'll get into that another day. And everyone has their own definition of what great really is and who belongs where and whatnot.
It's hard. It's such a feel thing.
It's very subjective.
It's so subjective. Like, even as when we were talking off air about it, you're making me question some of my assumptions.
We'll just really quick use Zenyatta.
Right.
I think Zenyatta was very good. I don't think she was great.
I think she was somewhere between great and a turf immortal.
Right.
Is my gut.
Right. And that's, and the fact that you can have such vast, such a huge space between what one thinks compared to another. It's all very subjective, but there's reasons for both sides of it.
Yeah, you could make a great case on your end, and I can make a great case on my end.
So it'll be, but let's not put the horse.
We'll have another
Carts and horses,
right? Yeah.
2.5 weeks
Crowns
to talk greatness before we see it. So we can maybe go deeper in next week's podcast.
Yeah, we'll listen back to exactly what, if anything, got in there from that discussion. I can't really remember. But
now let's move forward. Now let's look at the Belmont. Only 8 horses in the Preakness. No big deal. Most of them, though, the reason is because the other ones are waiting for the Belmont. 1.5 miles. Big Sandy. Going to have all sorts of other big races that day. The Met Mile and a lot of grade 1s, grade 2, Woody Stevens, Manhattan, all sorts of good racing.
And there's no truth to the rumor that Mr. Z's running in the Woody Stevens and then in the Belmont and then in the Nightcap in the N1X, right?
Right. That is correct. He's getting a break.
Perhaps the most shocking news.
He's getting a breather.
He's getting the breather we've all thought that he deserves, because he's cool.
He's a cool horse. Shows up and runs.
He is.
Shows up and runs. Now he's got to go up here, American Pharoah, and he's going to face the threesome from Todd. And this is another reason why I was okay saying it yesterday, and can interpret it however you'd like. But let's just use Pletcher's horses right now as the example. You have Made from Lucky, who won the Peter Pan, not in a flashy style, but guess what? That's a style that, if he can be a little closer than he was in the Peter Pan, that's a style that can win the Belmont Stakes. Kind of grinding, not going to blow you away, going to get the job done.
And you know what he did in winning the Peter Pan?
Go ahead.
Flattered American Pharoah.
True. Very good point. Yeah, because American Pharoah had more or less destroyed him in Arkansas.
I just don't think he's fast enough, and I think he was on the right part of the track at the Peter Pan. I'd be kind of shocked if he did anything.
Carpe Diem, who threw an absolute bomb in the Kentucky Derby. Prior to that, he went off. He was the 3rd choice in the Derby. I'm sure a lot of people are completely off that bandwagon. He is, if I'm looking for a mildly interesting horse that I think could possibly, just looking at the pedigree, and he's got positional speed, he can run, he should be able to run all day. Maybe he hated the track at Churchill, I don't know. You got Carpe Diem, he'll be showing up. Then you got Materiality, who I think is everyone's
wise guy horse.
Because had he gotten out of the gate, you can make the argument the Derby is different.
He ran a huge Derby.
If you look at how he ran on at the end, he ran big. Positionally, he'll be close with American Pharoah, I would imagine, early on.
You would think. The only reason he didn't break in the Derby, didn't get out of the gate, which is why he had the running style he had. We know he can be a lot more forward. He's got the speed to hang right with him. I don't know if Todd wants to use team tactics, but if he did, he'd be the one who would try to run with the Pharoah.
Yeah, no, 100%. And then the only other one there's a couple from the Derby, but the other big one is Frosted that is pointed that direction for Kieran.
You said on this podcast that you thought he ran a better race than American Pharoah in the Derby.
Yeah, and without getting too far ahead of ourselves, we got 2.5 weeks to go. I'm not going to pick American Pharoah. I'm going to pick Frosted because I just think that he, and again, we've got 2.5 weeks. A lot of stuff can happen. But I think Frosted, and guess what? Kieran is red hot still, and he's won the Belmont before. He knows what it takes to get a horse to win the Belmont. There's other horses. Keen Ice is going to show up. Mubtahij coming out of the Derby. Mike the Cock was going to bring him back, get freshened over in Europe, and they called an audible and said, we're here. The distance isn't going to be a problem. Why not? Let's run him. He's another one that he's going to have that sort of grinding. He pretty much ran an even race in the Derby. Guess what? An even race in the Belmont recently has been the formula of what it takes to win. It's just who can stay the distance.
Have they brought his feed over?
I don't know. I haven't been concern. In tune with the feed issue, with him getting his proper oats from abroad.
They will be adding Lasix though, right?
Is that the word?
I don't know.
I thought I had seen that, but I could be wrong. Don't take me literally on that.
We got a long time. We'll find that out. If they do, it'd be very interesting. Conquest Curlinate is going to be coming over this one. He ran second in the Peter Pan. He ran second in the Illinois Derby. There's a long way to go, but would it shock me if he did it? No, I think he can easily win. I really do. And this is the first time. I didn't think California Chrome could win last year. I just didn't. I didn't think he was good enough. I think this horse is properly good enough. He's done so many different things. He doesn't need to go to the lead. Doesn't need to sit off of a target. He still hasn't gotten kickback yet, which is still an intriguing.
I think it's unlikely that it'll have to.
Fair.
I think this is very likely another send and bottom out the field. I think that's, again, unless somebody wants to be crazy, I think they've shown a willingness to employ that tactic. Again, if part of last year's Belmont went a little bit into the decision making for Victor in terms of his tactical idea, I could see more of same.
There is one that came out yesterday and said they're going to be on the lead.
War Story.
Your boy.
Luch, my boy. He's in my stable. I don't know if he's my boy. We'll get to that in a minute. But at Luch Racing, our friend on Twitter, has made it very clear that War Story will be getting the lead. If American Pharoah wants the lead, War Story is not fast enough to get the lead. If War Story wants to do something crazy, if they want to go nuts, I think he could. Again, post positions will come into play here.
Sure.
But you would think he'd be able to sit just off if they want to do something really crazy. But Mr. Z was a dead send and not fast enough. Who's faster early, Mr. Z or War Story? You'd think Mr. Z.
No, agreed. I just think we're at that point now where we're going to have 2.5 weeks of just kind of a lot of the same talk. Just,
It's great, isn't it?
What else? Well, really, at this point, what else is there to question? Not about the horse, but what other new questions can we even come up with? We know these horses now. They've run all of them recently. It's kind of feels like that we've gotten through that first week of the 2 weeks between the Super Bowl and the championship games, the AFC and NFC title games, and all the questions come out in that first week, and then that second week leading up, it's just kind of like, oh my God, enough! Just play the game. I'm feeling like, all right, we got through the Derby, we had all those questions, we got through the Preakness. Now this 2.5 weeks, it's like, what else can we possibly say? Go run the race. We know it. And sure, they can train if something happens, but what else is there to say?
Well, I'm very curious to see how Pharoah looks when he gets back onto the racetrack, which I'm sure he did this morning. John Nichols, the clocker at Churchill Downs, has had strong opinions about him the whole time and been absolutely dead on. Very curious to see if he still thinks he's looking in fine fettle, or if maybe that early pace or the effort took something out of him. That's one of the big questions for me that we will have an answer to in the next couple of days. The other big question that we will not have an answer to until, whatever it's going to be, 6:20 p.m. In a couple of Saturdays.
They've moved it back, by the way, to 10:07. Final post on Belmont Stakes Day is 8:12.
8:12?
8:12.
So what time
Sunset, the Belmont will be at 6:50.
6:50. Okay, so we'll know at 6:52.
More time for the Goo Goo Dolls.
That's right, the Goo Goo Dolls.
Sunset is at like 8:40. The final post is 8:12.
Join us for the gloaming at Belmont. They better hope it's good weather.
My God.
But will he stay? That's the question. Will he stay? He acts to me like he'll stay. He doesn't look like he's stopping. He gallops out like he's not going to stop. But until they do it,
that's it.
You don't know.
We don't know with any of them, though. And that's the thing. I mean, it's, you get that question a lot, breeding. And well, guess what? None of them are bred for it. None of them are bred for it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. Yeah. Anyone that knows or tells you straight and looks you straight in the eye and says he can say, they're lying because they don't know.
Yeah, you can see what the page suggests, but that's it.
None of us know until they get out there and do it. And when they hit the quarter pole, is he going to start getting short? Because I can imagine he's probably going to be on the lead at that point. And all hell's breaking loose at Belmont Park.
This crowd is going to be nuts.
And then think about it. Obviously, that's going to be the main event. But, I mean, you might have a 3-year-old running in the Met Mile on the undercard.
That's right.
Who has a legitimate chance. You're going to have last year's Belmont winner running in that race. You're going to have Untappable.
You're going to have last year's Met Mile winner running in that race.
Is that still the plan?
I think so.
After that?
After third place finish? I would, he doesn't want to sprint. Right?
I don't care.
We probably have more casual listeners listening than usual. We should run over who the horses we're
talking about.
Malice
is the Belmont winner from 2 years ago. Last year's Met Mile winner. He came back and ran into Diablo 2 Sundays ago. And I got to be honest with you. Just do him a solid and retire him. Let him go to the shed.
It doesn't look great, but I think that race was so obviously not a race that he was in for anything other than fitness that I'm not quite I wouldn't make him a huge number. I mean, actually in that race he would be a pretty big number on my odds line, but he wouldn't be 100-1.
No. But I mean, we were talking. Mike and Dan and I were joking a couple of weeks ago doing a morning line, and they both made him second choice. And at the time, I suppose that was reasonable. There's no way in hell he's second choice in the morning line now. There's no way.
He's a price.
There's no way.
Yeah, he's got to be a price because there's just too many questions. I think we must have talked about this on the show where you weren't here, Matt, about how when they remember at the beginning of the year when they announced the schedule.
Yeah.
And we were like, what's the significance of this? And we said, we all agreed the significance is if he deviates from the schedule, bet like heck against him in that race.
100%.
That was the Diablo.
Yeah. I was baffled that he took so much money. And let's look at it too. I mean, one of my favorite horses was in that race, and he is not anything of what he used to be, because if the old Clearly Now was still that horse, he wins for fun.
It was amazing.
I don't remember who the winner was, but I mean, it was essentially
Stall-walking dude.
Yeah, it was a Jacobson reclamation project.
Was it Jacobson or was it
Jacobson?
It was Jacobson.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, look, Stall-walking dude is not winning the Met Mile.
No.
So Clearly Now, I mean, God, I hope he doesn't go to the Met. And Palace Malice, I know the figure was okay. It was like a 91 or a 92, and much smarter people than I can pick up on this sort of thing. Watching him, I didn't get the vibe that was a horse that wanted to. He just looked like he was just out there running like. I haven't done this in a long time. I don't really want to do it anymore.
You might well be right, but we'll take a look. I'm not in a hurry to bet him. I'll agree with you on that much.
No, especially when I was drooling over Tonalist's comeback the other day. But look,
he looked awesome.
If competitive edge, I think that's gonna. A lot of people have said
that's the 3-year-old you were referring to.
If competitive edge runs in it, Pletcher clearly thinks he can win.
Yeah, 3-year-olds can win that race for sure.
So
get and wait, big critical time of year for that.
But all in all, American Pharoah wins the Preakness. Now it's hurry up and wait. We had a little bit of a wonky period with this show because we had a little tape malfunction. But we'll be back Friday. We'll go over public handicapper races, and that's about it. Anything else you guys want to add before we
really
cut
fast?
out?
I just want to talk super quick about the tournament out in Santa Anita. Little quick version of tournament talk. Just want to give props to former trainer Gary Johnson, who won the day out there, got a BCBC seat. got an NHC seat. Santa Anita always does such a great job hosting those live bank events. You were missed, Matt. I guess you played in the equivalent tournament last year or one of these.
Yep.
There's another one happening at the end of June. Folks are going to have an opportunity to qualify for that on drfqualify.com as soon as this weekend. We've also got Breeders' Cup qualifying action this weekend and NHC qualifying action as well. Check out nhcqualify.com, bcqualify.com, drfqualify.com, and my blog daily for more info on tournaments. We'll get into more tournament talk, but this show was meant to be all about the Preakness.
And it more or less was. And before we do cut out, real quick, we didn't touch on him. We said we're going to. Dortmund, I didn't have an issue with the way he ran.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's funny that we went this whole podcast and didn't mention Dortmund or firing line.
Yeah, we're gonna have to. This will be our final send off. Dortmund, any complaint? I thought he ran fine.
He's not that. I don't think he loved the track.
Yeah,
I'm not sure he's as good as his stablemate, which is what we've been hearing all along. That's looking good. Here, let me just throw this one out at you because I did hear this little bit of conspiracy theory scuttlebutt that he did grab Martin, perhaps being more of a Baffert company man than a Kaleem Shah company man, grabbed pretty good coming out of the gate. To me, I don't think that much of it because I don't think the plan would have been to run, even if he was trained by somebody else, I don't know that the plan would have been to run with American Pharoah. But some argued that his best chance, given everything, would have been to break a little stronger and be a little bit closer. And perhaps there was some politics going on there, given what an important client Bob Baffert is. Anyway, your thoughts? BS conspiracy theory or something there?
I don't think so. I just don't think he was good enough or fast enough late. I think Martin wrote him that if he was as good as American Pharoah or better than American Pharoah, he would have had every chance, especially as they turned for home. He just, and I don't think, knowing that Mr. Z was going to be gunning for the lead, I don't think gunning him, especially as big a horse as Dortmund is, I don't know if that's the right move in a 9.5 furlong race.
No, I thought he just I just didn't think he was as good, and there's nothing wrong with that. We said it that the camp has always made it clear that they think American Pharoah is the superior horse, and boy, it's a hell of a 1-2 punch.
Sure.
I'm not going to hold that against Dortmund. He was in the slop. He probably hated it. He's going to get a break now. And going forward, he lost a little bit of weight going into the Preakness, so the Derby took more out of him. And again, this is eyes that are much more capable of spotting this kind of thing than mine. Sunday morning, when we saw American Pharoah come through, and even I saw him Saturday night immediately after when he came back to the barn, I thought he looked fine, but again, I don't know this sort of thing. People that know much more about it than I do said he looked like he hadn't even raced, where all the other horses were quite gassed, quite tired. Yeah, he looked like he could go in for another spin.
Non-effort over the surface, maybe? Is that the theory?
No. I'm talking about American Pharoah.
Oh, Pharoah. Oh, I thought you were talking Dortmund.
Dortmund came back. Dortmund is clearly tired.
Okay, gassed.
American Pharoah came back, and of all the runners out of the Preakness, Saturday night and Sunday morning looked like he hadn't run at all.
It's the easy answer. He's just more aerodynamic because he's got less tail.
He's got less tail. He does have less tail. That's a fact.
Thanks, Mr. Z.
Firing line, please don't anyone take this the wrong way. How did he go off as short as he did?
We talked on the webinar. Bounce to the moon was the guess from us.
Well, and I kind of mentioned it on the webinar. I mean, the concern going into the Kentucky Derby was the 6 weeks from the Sunland Derby, and Simon Callahan and Gary Stevens had both said the way the horse trains, the way the horse runs, the 6 weeks would be the perfect amount of time leading into the Kentucky Derby. I kind of questioned it. He proved them exactly right. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, okay, he needs 6 weeks, he runs a huge effort. Oh, but because he had the 6 weeks, he should be fine coming back on 2 weeks rest. It's kind of one way or another. His other big effort, as Pete mentioned in the webinar, was 7 weeks after his previous race when he ran that huge race against Dortmund in the San Felipe. He's just a horse that I think needs a little bit more time than he got in the 2 weeks.
Yeah, and you incorporate that with, I'm shocked at the amount of people more and more that come out and they say that they don't care about lead changes.
Well, that
That
too.
doesn't make
sense.
Did you see my tweet?
No.
I tweeted out, if you're not concerned at all about firing line's unwillingness or inability to switch leads in the Derby, then I've got a share of Mr. Z to sell you.
Yeah.
I was blown away by big people too that say.
Do they say they don't? Do you think they just mean because they don't see it or they don't factor into their handicapping? Or
they don't think it's a big deal.
Or they don't think it's a big deal. See, that I get. The first thing of what I said, I get if you say that. You're not somebody who's focused on that. Okay, that's not your bag. But to say that it's not meaningful.
I mean.
Well, evidently Stevens said that he will switch leads in the Preakness, and he wasn't concerned. He came out and specifically said.
I don't know if he switched leads because I think he's still running.
Yeah, no, I mean, and then the argument always, they had that built in that, he didn't take to the track or whatever. He was never going to run big that day.
They said he stumbled, but, he recovered. I mean, a good horse is going to be able to recover from a stumble.
I mean, I was just surprised that he was such a, he had taken so much money.
A lot of smart people liked him. I just...
And they're gonna give him time. They should give him time.
But they should. They absolutely should.
He's a good horse.
6 or 7 weeks and run him back. Maybe he'll do okay.
He's a good horse.
We'll find out. Yeah, I think that's about it. Last thing, real quick, Texas Red official workout this morning.
Oh, that's good. I was beginning to
3
think.
panels. Just getting him back into the swing of things. Just, get out there.
Where is he? Out of Santa Anita?
I believe he's at Santa, yeah.
Cool.
Out there, stretching his legs a little bit. So maybe we'll see him over the summer. Who knows?
Be great. If I hadn't been staying out so late when I was out there, I would have gone to Clocker's Corner and
Gone and checked in on him.
Yeah.
We'll be back Friday. We'll do the public handicapper races, one of our off weeks. That being said, a lot of stakes racing this weekend. A lot of big things going on. So stay tuned to that. Come on back Friday. We'll do it again. Until then, Pete, take it away.
May you win all your photos.